My name's Stella, but lots of people know me as Radical Cartoons, and I live in Bristol. I've been involved in this modern women's rights movement since 2020, which is when I was publicly cancelled. I was the main political cartoonist of a newspaper called The Morning Star, which is Britain's only daily communist newspaper. And it had been running for 70 years under a different name in the past. And I was their main political cartoonist, which means that I was the one that was in every week, week after week. Although they did have some others. None of us were paid. It was basically, we were doing it for the cause. So I'd been with them since 2015, so 5 years, and never been any controversy about anything. I'd submitted loads and loads of cartoons that were controversial, which people might have thought controversial, and we never had any problems at all. And then I started to notice in the news that there was a load of stuff going on about this trans issue, specifically about pronouns. And the women's rights group, Women's Place UK, had held a meeting about it. And the Labour Party were trying to force all members of the Labour Party to use pronouns, and if they didn't, the threat was that they would be expelled from the Labour Party. So this was all in the news. So this was a big deal from the Morning Star, which is a left-wing newspaper. So obviously they were covering this. So I sent in a cartoon about it, and the cartoon is the one I've sent to you, which maybe you'll be able to put up on with a link for this video, which a lot of women now call the crocodile cartoon. But it had a name, and its name was Endgame, because I said to the Morning Star, if the women's movement doesn't win this is the end game for feminism. So that's what had inspired me to do the cartoon, and it was a bit prophetic because it shows a crocodile coming into a women's only swimming pool, which has actually now happened at Hampstead Heath, which obviously was then a few years in the future. So the cartoon was a little bit prophetic, really, which is quite funny. I mean, I don't want to use bad language, but the shit really hit the fan, and the Morning Star had never had this happen to them before. The Trade Union Council called a special emergency meeting and threatened them with defunding. Nobody had ever threatened them with defunding before, just about this one cartoon. And they were forced to apologise for it, and they were forced to drop me as like a hot brick, basically. And the only reason I know what went on behind the scenes is because I went to the Free Speech Union for help. Free Speech Union had only just started, so I was one of their very few, very early clients. And they engineered a phone call for me with the editor of the Morning Star, because they just basically abandoned me. They didn't give me any explanation of what was going on, why I was cancelled. I knew nothing from their side at all. I only knew what was going on through my union contacts, because a colleague at work had come up to me and said, "Oh, Stella, a cartoon of yours has caused a bit of a stink at the Morning Star." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" Because this was all going on Twitter. Well, I'd never been on Twitter, so I knew nothing about what was going on. And they were in a position of being my employer. Even though they didn't pay me, it was still an employer relationship. And how it's supposed to happen is that you don't throw your contributors under the bus. You're supposed to support your contributors in the newspaper industry. Now, the fact that Morning Star are not members of IPSO or anything, because they're an independent outfit, they're not a member of anything, so they do what they please. But they should have still had some sense of honour and duty towards a contributor, especially a woman, being that they were left-wing and they were supposed to have the high ground and all that stuff. So I only found out from a private conversation with the editor that half the staff had threatened to resign. They were under tremendous pressure, and he was told that he could only print stuff about women's rights if he balanced it with something from the trans point of view. Okay. And this was they were all completely poleaxed by it. I mean, obviously some of the journalists were on my side and thought it was terrible, but others were completely in the trans camp. So his hands were very much tied, and to this day they have never apologized, and they have never printed my right of reply. And every February I send them another letter saying, any chance of it this year, and I doubt if they ever will. They have more or less wiped this out of their history. But I didn't blame any individual person at the paper. I felt sorry for them in many ways. I had become aware that this was taking over the trade unions, and because I was a union rep, and had been starting to see it at work, but it still came as a tremendous shock to me when it happened. If you're told that you're being trashed worldwide on Twitter, and you're not even on a platform you're not even on. And I then started finding out that they were targeting people who knew me professionally and who people that had used me as a professional illustrator. They were targeting them, and that was affecting their business and their personal lives. So I'm afraid at that stage, where I knew very little about all this, I opted for the easy way out. It was the beginning of the pandemic. We were offered early retirement, those of us that qualified. I did take that offer, and that obviously stopped it all, because at work, because the union was threatening to throw me out. It would have become a big public employment tribunal, and there was no way I was going to involve my work colleagues in all this, because I was seeing what was happening to people I knew professionally. They were being hounded. Their families were being targeted on Twitter, and I said, one of your questions is, were you surprised? Did you have any unexpected allies? And my unexpected ally was my local branch secretary of my union, PCS, because he was an elderly guy. He was heading towards retirement, and he immediately said to me, "I'll defend you, Stella." And I said, "What? You mean you'll defend me in an employment tribunal against our own union?" And he said, "Yes." And he would have done as well. But I said to him, "Look, I'm taking the early retirement. We're all being sent home anyway, to work from home." I said, "I am not taking that risk, and I am not dragging all of you into it." So some people might say I was a coward, but in my defense, I will say it was very early in my journey in this. It had only just happened. Being cancelled is quite traumatic. Did it have effects like job loss? Well, in a sense that I took early retirement, which means I lost 6 years of building up my pension, yeah. Because the union in the workplace was threatening to throw me out and discipline me. Yes, of course, the HR knew, and everybody. So, yes, of course, it was all linked together. And the boss of the Civil Service Union at the time was Mark Sorotka, who was married to a woman called Ruth Sorotka, who ran Women's Place UK. So if you can't tell me that none of this was connected, all these people know one another and even married to one another, So I was obviously targeted. The newspaper was targeted. Anyway, so that's what happened to me. Now, I didn't have any kind of support network at all. I didn't know people I'm not like a celebrity. I didn't know people in like academia or journalism like some of these other women that have been cancelled. I had nobody, literally nobody. And that's why I went to the Free Speech Union. And fair play to them, they were fantastic. It was very early days for them. They only had one lawyer. And I mean, now they've got dozens of lawyers, and 40% of their casework now is all GC casework. But back then it was just one or two of us. So all they could do was do a letter before defamation, but at least I got an apology, a private apology out of them, out of the Morning Star, although what I really would like is for them to print my right of reply as an artist. And I still ask for them to do that every year, but no luck yet. Anyway, so that was my story about my cancellation. The only one of the celebrity women's rights authors who's mentioned me in any of the books is Julie Birchell. She wrote a book called Welcome to the Woke Trials, and she actually mentioned my case in the introduction to her book, and she's the only one who's bothered to mention my case. When you think all the different books that have been written about it. And Julie Birchall, she grew up in Bristol as well. She was an ex-Bristol girl, and I love her to bits. She's one of my favourites in this movement, actually. Very early in 2020, this all happened, and because we were sent home from work, it became the first time almost that I started looking at YouTube. I'd almost never looked at YouTube in my life. I started looking at YouTube and I started finding out all about all this controversy. And the first people I saw on YouTube really was Magdalen Burns and Kelly J. Keane. So then I found out that they were doing Standing for Women in Hyde Park once a month. And I went up to one in June 2020, and I started going regularly, started speaking at Speaker's Corner, and I found there, that's where I found a sort of tribe, if you like. That's where I found support, and that's how I started speaking out about it. And my attitude then was, well, I've been cancelled publicly, so who cares now? If I'm on camera, hardly matters now, does it? So I was quite outspoken, and that was really good because I got to meet women from all over the country, all walks of life, people that I wouldn't never have met otherwise. You can go along to Reformatory and you can stand next to women of the total opposite politics to you, people who are highly religious people you'd never ever rub shoulders with normally, and you're all there for just one purpose, So I found it I found it really, really supportive, and I can't praise Kelly J. Keane enough. Really, she's given hundreds of women the opportunity to meet other people who are in the same boat, speak out about it, get support. As far as I'm concerned, I've been a feminist all my life. I always will be a feminist. It makes no difference to me, and uh, I don't care what other women think about the label feminist. To me, a feminist is somebody who sticks up for women all over the world against oppression, and that's it, really. I don't think there are any other nuances. There's no other what ifs. That is literally what a feminist is. So, my old hero in feminism was Germaine Greer, and I'm very old school. I was around in the 70s and early 80s when things like the Yorkshire Ripper was going on, and so I remember all that, the beginnings of Spare Rib and all that. So uh, it hasn't changed my attitude. My attitude is that we haven't had women's rights very long in this country. It's a blink of an eye. 150, 200 years? It's a blink of an eye. I'm sure we can all remember examples from our mothers, and maybe not having their own bank accounts and all that kind of thing. We can all remember that. That's in our age group. So it's not that long ago, and it can easily be removed. And we only have to look at a country like Afghanistan to see how women's rights can disappear overnight. And to think that couldn't happen here, I think people are naive if they think that couldn't happen here. So that's another reason why I've been very pleased to be part of Let Women Speak, because we've supported women in other countries. Kelly J. Keane has, in the last 6 months, she's been running a thing called Free Your Face, and she's had women from all over the Middle East writing to her anonymously on Twitter sometimes because they can't give their real names. And some of these women they're not poor women, they're in the middle classes in those countries, but they are oppressed. They're repressed in every aspect of their lives. And she's had hundreds and hundreds of messages from around the Middle East saying, "We're so glad somebody is speaking up for us," you know. So we've been going down to Speaker's Corner and done little stunts with like imitation veils, which we sort of, you know, I mean, and I'm not making light of it. You know, it's an important way of getting the message over. You know, so I'm very pleased that she's done that. I'm firmly on the side of that we should be sticking up for women who are oppressed anywhere in the world. Uh, so so the trans movement hasn't really changed my mind on that. What what it's done in my to change my views is that freedom of speech has got a price. You can't just go around spouting death and rape threats at people and then say, "Oh, it's freedom of speech." So freedom of speech. I'm a member of the Free Speech Union, but that doesn't mean free speech means everything. It doesn't mean everything. You can't go around threatening people. And if you're involved in this, you have to keep to some certain standards of and I do that in my artwork when because I've been an artist for all my adult life, and I have certain rules about what kind of work I will accept. I will never do anything that involves violence or gore, you know, anything like that, you know, or anything violent towards an individual person. I will never do anything like that for anybody. So that's just my criteria. And I've have had women in the women's movement ask me to do things like that, and I've always refused. So that's just my own standards. So yeah, I've got quite a few things I'm proud of. I'm proud of self-publishing my book in 2020. I took all the emotion, if you like, and all the trauma of being cancelled and managed to publish my own book towards the end of 2020, which is still on Amazon. People can go and get it, and it's called 2020, the year we were all cancelled, and we were cancelled in two ways. We were all being cancelled through this mob mentality, this cancel culture, and we were being cancelled by being locked away at home because of the pandemic. So it had a dual meaning, the title, you know. I'm very proud of that. I never thought I'd write a book in my life. Of course, it's a cartoon review of the year. It's not. It's not. It's not. It's colour cartoons all the way through it. So it's not. It's not all writing. It's and I talked about other cartoonists who've also been cancelled, and so I hope people find it interesting. I was very pleased that Maria McLachlan of Peak Trans wrote a brilliant review of it on her website, and you can still find that. I went on loads of feminist podcasts. I quite early on, and there's a massive long list of them from Megan Murphy, Graham Linehan, people like this. I went on a massive amount of podcasts. Podcast of the Lotus Eaters, that was fun because their offices are in Swindon, so I was able to go down to Swindon and do it live. That was good fun. Loads and loads of them. I've almost lost count of them. Women's Liberation Radio News, Object, oh, so many different women's groups. And I'm also proud of supporting Kelly J. King when she ran for Parliament in May 2024 in my own constituency. So we ran around Bristol, you know, getting signatures and things, and went to the hustings. Of course, she was banned from a couple of hustings. So it was all good fun, you know. Looking back on it, it was good fun. Liaising with the police to organise Let Women Speak Bristol in May 2025, which was our second Let Women Speak. Our first one was in 2022, which was outrageously, you know, we had mobs really facing us and the police were appalling. So when we came back and did it again in May 2025, it was much better. And we liaised with the police and they provided a small army to protect us. We had horses, we had drones. They were staking it out from about 8 in the morning. It was absolutely marvelous. So that was a really, really good experience. So I'm now the local organizer in Bristol for Let Women Speak, which is completely unpaid. I don't want anybody listening to this to think we're paid. We're doing it all as volunteers, and I'm very yeah, and I'm very proud that we've got an annual calendar of events in Bristol, Let Women Speak, which we're now into our third year, I think, really, of social events which women can come to. And they don't have to be in Let Women Speak. They can be in other groups like Women's Rights Network, Women of Wessex. We say a lot of the events are open, so we say bring your female friends who are interested in this but haven't yet joined anything. Bring them along, you know. So yeah, we try to be quite open. Bristol is really a centre for woke. Always has been, always will be. The fact that we've now got trans like in the mix, it it doesn't make Bristol any worse than what it's always been. It's always been bad, you know. I mean, the whole thing about students being organised by unions to oppose women speaking goes back to the suffragette era. And in 1913, the Bristol students from the Bristol University burned down the suffragettes' shop in Bristol. This is how far back it all goes. And we've had riots in Bristol and nonsense going on with BLM and all that, riots in front of the police station. I mean, if you live in Bristol, you know it's a centre of anarchists and nutcases and people who are just organised students to do all kinds of things. And then more recently, of course, we've had all the Palestine marches, and the trans activists have allied themselves with that for a very simple reason. Both ideologies hate women and oppress women. I mean, it's obvious that they have something in common. Why people think it's a surprise, I don't know. Obviously, they have something in common. So when we walk around Bristol, we see the Pride Progress thing everywhere. It's on. We've got a crossing, a Progress painted zebra crossing. We've got it. See it painted on the wall. People have flags. Businesses have the little stickers. Show that trans friendly. You know, it's everywhere you go in Bristol, really. In the centre, not once you get out away from the centre, it's so bad, you know. So we have become quite blasé about it. And I vividly, we have a picnic once a year on Clifton Down, a suffragette picnic. And last year, somebody had come up from Somerset, and she was sat with us, and look at that, she said, and look at what it was. It was a first bus Pride, the first bus Progress Pride bus going round past, and we see it every day. We're so blasé about it, you know. But to her, that was a shock. So we've got a Pride fire engine that goes round, a Pride first bus that goes round, and people who come from other parts of the country are really like gobsmacked when they see this. But we're so used to it in Bristol. Um, we've got businesses that have got the paddy flag hanging on flagpoles above their businesses, and if you go, if you see a business like that, it's always got the trans stuff as well. So it's become like normal. I mean, in some ways, yeah, in some ways it makes you more determined to oppose it, not less. I mean, I if I go out and I've just got stickers in my pocket, and I will simply stick them over the nearest one of their stickers that I see. I'll just stick ours over them. You know, it doesn't bother me. I, in many ways, it gives you more incentive. Because I was involved in politics for 40 odd years anyway. First with the old Liberal Party, then with the Lib Dems. I mean, mea culpa, you know, the Lib Dems. Feel embarrassed saying that now. And independence. And once I campaigned for a Conservative, but only because he was an independent, using the Conservatives for his own to get elected, which he didn't. But I did help him as well, because my attitude is anybody who can upset the apple cart, who can have a go at the local bureaucracy, and who can stick up for us. I've moved away from labels like left and right. I still consider myself very hard left. If there was a communist government coming in, I'd support them, you know. But we are never going to get a communist government, so we have to be pragmatic about it. So when I see a party coming in who wants to oppose mass migration, for example, which is an old socialist position, to oppose mass migration because it undercuts your workers' Indigenous workers' wages and conditions, and has been a socialist position since the birth of the Labour Party, then I may vote for that party, whoever they are. And I'm sorry, but you have to look at what's the best for the country. I'll take another example. When the Tories brought in a thing called the bedroom tax, everybody called it the bedroom tax. It was a example of they were um, repricing, if you like, the cost of social housing, so that if you had an extra room and you couldn't justify having it, you paid an extra 12 quid, and the people who were on housing benefit, that came off their housing benefit. So what the Tories did wrong with that policy was bringing it all in one fell swoop. What they should have done, of course, was wait for people to move out of a house and phase it in, so it was just the new voids that had the extra price cost on, because then people could choose. But they didn't do it that way. Now, um, rearranging the wealth so that it's more equal, so that people who needed the two-bedroom flats could have a two-bedroom flat, was not actually a conservative policy. It's obviously redistributing wealth is obviously a socialist policy. It was the first time a Tory government had ever implemented what is actually socialism, and nobody saw it that way. And the reason they didn't see it that way is because it wasn't phased in. Had it been phased in, because it wasn't a new policy, the councils already had an existing policy that you shouldn't have a two-bedroom flat if you didn't need it. All the Conservative government did was tell them, you've got to implement this and not just talk about it. So, and then the other good example is during the pandemic, when Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor, Conservative Chancellor, who gave us all furlough money and grant money so that we could stay at home without having to go to work, because many businesses couldn't support their staff working from home. And he brought in a system of furlough money and grant money, which none of us had to pay back, which was an example of universal basic income, probably the biggest example of it in Europe that has ever been tried. He didn't get any credit for that, but those of us who are on the left, we could easily see that that was an experiment in universal basic income, and it seemed to work because nobody was queuing up to try and pay it back, were they? Everybody was quite happy to accept it, even though they condemned him afterwards. And yet he's the only chancellor we've ever had who's ever done anything like that. And also there was grant money coming out to help with the cost of the energy bills, and that was Sunak as well. So just because people are of different politics, they might be implementing policies that you actually agree with. And I think this is why the labels of right and left have become meaningless. They've become blurred. We shouldn't really be thinking of ourselves like that. I'm on a social media called Getter. I've never been on Twitter. I'm on Getter, which is mainly Americans, and I've got 8,500 followers over there. And they're mainly Americans who I talk to when we're asleep. They're awake. So it's quite strange, the conversations, because they're 8 hours in between them. But they just think they think what their attitude towards Britain is really funny. But the good thing about it is that all this trans rubbish came from America, and now it's America which is bringing it to an end. So the few idiots that we've still got running around shouting about it here, the rug is being pulled out from under them, really. Yeah, there's still a long way to go. I mean, we are always going to need women's rights groups and women's rights networks. We're always going to need them, because the transhumanist movement will move on from this when they find this is a dead end. They're already moving on to things like growing babies in test tubes and stuff, so you don't even need women. So they're already moving on to that, and we've always got to be vigilant. So I won't be giving up women's rights activism. I'll carry on with it as long as I can. suppose, well, I realised as soon as I was cancelled and started, I was on this learning curve about the women's rights movement in Britain, but I knew straight away what I was looking at. It's quite obvious that transgenderism is basically a shop window for transhumanism, because if you can get parents and educators and lawmakers to agree to this, you can get them to agree to chips in babies' heads. It's blatant transhumanism, and it's just like the first stage, almost like an experiment in transhumanism, because they're moving on now to what they want, what their real goal is, which is for the elites actually to live for about 200 years and have everything. And that is, transhumanism is all about trying to extend life, trying to change human beings into something different, like cyborgs. So all this stuff about persuading parents that it's perfectly all right to have your child chopped up in the name of some ideology is paving the way for when we all become cyborgs, which thank goodness I'm not going to live to see that world. And so I didn't find this surprising at all. I mean, I'd grown up reading science fiction, so to me it was blatant in your face that this is what was happening. And now we've got people like Elon Musk running around openly talking about transhumanist goals and what it's all going to be like in the future. But women I find that I meet in this movement took a long time to get round to that it was about transhumanism. It took Kelly J about 4 years before she started talking about it. But now she does. But it's took a long time. And when I first started noticing all this, the only woman I knew about who was really talking about it was Jennifer Bilek, who, if you look into her work, she talks about the transhumanist billionaires who are behind a lot of this. And she has talked about that a lot. And I would recommend anybody who is new to this to look up Jennifer Bilek's work. But she started off with just talking about where the money streams were coming from. But then she actually went on a journey of understanding how the transhumanists were, what they were planning, really. So yeah, I would recommend that to anybody. Do have local women who all this trans nonsense is going on in their own families. Their families are split over it. They can't speak to their grandchildren. They can't spend Christmas with half their family because of this. So we've got this locally. We know women who are going through this in their families, in their workplaces, in what they do for recreation. Even I met a woman today who's a Buddhist. It's even invading Buddhism. Yeah, it's even invading Buddhism. She told me that the local Buddhists were starting to promote some non-binary guy and all this, and she was very upset about it. And so yeah, it's still everywhere, and we still have to fight against it. But yes, women are afraid. I know women who are afraid to come out of their houses in Bristol. They think some giant trans-identifying bloke is going to be lurking around every corner. It is very difficult. If you see stuff on the screen all the time about screaming mobs of men, and you're a naturally fearful person anyway, or you're frail, or you don't even have to be frail, but just women generally are, obviously, we know our weaknesses. We know that we're not capable of standing up against a load of angry men. We know that. We've seen what happens. But that makes you think it's around every corner, unfortunately, and it isn't. So part of what I do is hold our meetups in the centre of town, in cafes and pubs, and so that women can get the idea that, yeah, come on, this is our city as well. We are allowed to walk around in our own city. You can't be afraid all the time, So that's one of the things I really am passionate about. If you're paying in a cafe, you are a paying customer. You got the right to be there just like anybody else, no matter what colour hair they've got. I was in one this morning, and the waitress came over and asked what badge I was wearing, which happens to be a Love Darlington nurse's badge, and she said, "Oh, can I have one?" And I gave her one, and then I gave her our business card as well for Let Women Speak. Now that cafe, we've regularly been in there, and on the next table has been a table full of trans-identified youth and their parents, because this is a student city, and we're there chatting away about women's rights, and they're over there chatting away about whatever they chat away about, and I think that's quite hilarious. And I like to be in a space like that because that's encouraging women to see we are allowed to be in these spaces as well. These do not belong to them. Come on, So that's one of the things I like to promote is to encourage women to. We've got to take our spaces back. Basically, we've got to take these spaces back. I would say join the Free Speech Union if you can afford it. They have a concessionary membership of £29 a year, which I've just gone on to because I'm going to be a pensioner. So I said to them, I want the cheaper membership. So £29 a year is the cheaper one. I would definitely say join it if you can, because they are now. He got made a knight, Sir Toby, for setting up the Free Speech Union, well deserved as well. And they are protecting the rights of gender critical people, if that's what you call them, all over the country. 40% of their casework is now defending our rights. So the other thing I would say is, if you're new to it, is read up on some of the successes we've had, and groups like Sex Matters for Women Scotland. Read up all the successes they've had in the campaigns, and the journalists who have supported us. And who can I mention? Judy Bindel, obviously, Judy Birchell, Joe Bartosh, Suzanne Moore, quite a few. Glosswitch on Twitter. Lots of journalists, lots of women authors. Read up on them. It's important, and be inspired by them. Be inspired by them. Follow them on X if that's where you are. But also, please come on Spinster, which is Turf social media, has been since 2019. I highly recommend it. You're going to love it. And I would also say join whatever local women's rights group you want to join. I'm promoting Let Women Speak, but I do appreciate that somebody else might want to be in Lesbian Labour, for example. There are different women's rights groups who are gender critical, and that is going to be very much up to you what one you want to join, because this is traumatic for a lot of women. It's important that we get together regularly. Well, it's amazing how long it takes as well for people to understand completely what's been happening and also find their courage. It takes ages. I mean, I've got a male friend who I used to work with. He was sent home. So we were both sent home from work at the beginning of the pandemic. And he's somebody I've kept in touch with. And when this all started, he would say to me things like, but I've got a friend who's got a trans friend. And that was some reason why he didn't agree with women's rights or something. Now it's like 5 years later, he now goes to Let Women Speak events himself, and he's completely changed his tune. And I think the more it's got into the mainstream media has helped immensely. I remember standing at Reformers Tree, I think it was probably early 2022 or something, saying, I think that GB News, which was brand new, GB News is going to be a game changer in this fight, because they are going to bring this issue into people's living rooms in a way it hasn't before. And they've been bloody brilliant, and I was right about that. To be fair to them, they were fighting against Ofsted in the early years. Ofcom rather, were making them toe a certain line, or and they got better and better, and now they've been openly supporting us now for a long time, which is really good. And again, they were completely trashed. Oh, right-wing media, blah blah blah. Don't look at it. I'm sorry, but so I was very pleased when it became more mainstream. What really changed people as well is Donald Trump's recent re-election, where practically the first thing he did was start signing executive orders to reverse the oppression on women's rights that had taken place in America. And that actually, my own husband, I'm going to say, was he was always supportive, but he didn't want to go to things himself. It was more like he thinks, oh, this is for women to deal with, which a lot of men do think like that. And he only really took it seriously when he saw it in all the national news, because the President of the United States had signed orders protecting women in sports and so on. It suddenly, I think that really brought it home to him. Actually, this is not just some minor thing. This is an international issue, and whatever we think about how the government has been infiltrated, they have been quietly recognising women. The very first person who was honoured was the lady who runs Transgender Trend. Stephanie, yeah. Obviously, Toby Young was given a knighthood. Sharon Davis have been made a baroness. They are quietly recognising women who have actually done this work. So, let's not try to be too pessimistic about all this. There's definitely an undercurrent, and the Wes Streetings of this world, his hands are pretty tied, but he has done a reasonable job, and we're still fighting this next big battle, which is obviously against the puberty blockers trial. But that is being fought, that's being fought. It's not a thing on its own. There's a lot of things going on, things like the assisted dying bill. All these things are, women are going to be more oppressed by all these things than anybody else. We have to look at everything through the lens of women's rights. We have to. Everything that crops up, we have to, because we're half the population, and across huge swathes of the world, we are an oppressed population. We have to think about this. And yeah, well, I'm a domestic violence survivor myself. Had to go through court case to get a man convicted, and this is it's not a little thing, and women have got all this in their background, and this is why so many women find this whole thing so frightening. I've seen women at Reformers Tree and Speaker's Corner who, even just the sound of loud male voices is enough to trigger them and make them fearful. This has to be something that we must understand it. There are an awful lot of women around who, because they've had a comfortable middle class life and they went to a nice school and nothing nasty has ever really happened to them, that they kind of look down their noses. Biggest disappointment is the amount of infighting that goes on. Now, this is perhaps more in America, but it happens here as well. That women divide into camps about different aspects of this, and the sisterhood that we should have, it's very limited. I mean, we don't really have the sisterhood we should have, because sisterhood means supporting women regardless of what you think their politics are or why they're doing it. I'm disappointed about that aspect of it. What I can't do about it, I don't know, except sort of lead by example and be accepting of women from all walks of life. I can do that. And the other thing I've been disappointed about is, which I suppose was an inevitable thing, was that the amount of mentally ill women and men that are attracted to this movement are on either as hangers-on or people who want to kind of muscle their way in and dominate it. And why am I really surprised? I've seen that in political parties before. As soon as something is out there which gives people the opportunity to meet up in public, and it's really going to attract the crazies. I mean, we actually see with trans activists that they're all crazies, really. But it happens in our movement as well. It happens in all kind of social movements. But that was surprising to me when I first started seeing it. I didn't like it, and I try to stay away from people like that and not get involved. I think the worst thing you can do is feed that sort of thing and get involved in it. Well, a good example is where Women's Rights Network split in half, and a load of them went off and formed a thing called Women of Wessex. So yeah, so we've got a thing called Women of Wessex in the West Country, which a lot of women joined because they were fed up of being part of Women's Rights Network. I'm in Women's Rights Network. It took me 2 years to get vetted, and they don't do anything. So what's the point of being involved in something that never does anything? It's a vehicle for its hierarchy. Um, and I think a lot of women figured that out early on. Also, nobody pays to be a member. So if you're getting nothing for nothing, why carry on with it? And I feel a lot of women felt like that about it. But I mean, as a pressure group, it's done its bits of work the same as Sex Matters does. Well, I know from my own liaison with the police was that they the authorities find it very confusing if there's a load of different women's groups in a region, because if one is all jumping up and down saying talk to me, they will talk to that group, and then afterwards women will say, well, how come you haven't consulted with us, what's going on? But they're not mind readers. They don't know necessarily who all these different groups are. That's part of the problem, that it's fragmented. But I think where Kelly J. Keane has really scored is that she has got a media personality. The media really like her, so she was able to really get on the media a lot. Get on telly, get on the radio, and abroad in other countries as well. And so by doing that, I mean, she's done so many things. She's been a kind of beacon for women, an example for women, and she's done it in a very, I would say, humanistic way. She never resorts to bad language. She doesn't, I mean, I've never. Well, maybe in person she does, but she not on her broadcasts, not on her live broadcasts. She doesn't use swear words, and she's a very educated woman. She's got a degree in theology, which most people don't know, but that's why she knows all about cults. But she's been completely determined to make publicity for about this issue, and she hasn't, despite all the problems it's caused to her own family, she hasn't let it stop her. So I feel we should take inspiration from women like that. I don't know about other parts of the country, but certainly trans ideology, unlike in the civil service, when it has got its tentacles into every corner of it, as far as I can see, um, because one of my co-organizer is in the civil service, so she can tell me they're really fighting against it in there. But in the NHS, certainly in the mental health sector, this has passed us by completely. It's almost like the last 6 years just didn't happen, and I don't see anybody wearing badges, pronoun badges, for example. Nobody talks about it. There's no lanyards. There's no posters. There's nothing about what toilet you should go in. There's no prescribed speech. Nothing. That nobody opens a meeting and says, "Oh, let's go around the room and tell all our pronouns." There's nothing like that at all. And I think it's because, first of all, mental health sector is down the bottom of the heap. It's the most underfunded, overlooked section of the National Health Service. And so that means that in a way, the trans activists haven't been attracted to it. There's no big paying jobs in it that they can wangle their way in to. Do you see what I mean? Unlike other institutions. And so in that way, it's been passed by. It's passed over as like You know, it's passed over as like the angel of the Lord passing over. Do you know what I mean? And not smiting our houses. It's it's like that, and it's great. And it's not in any of their documentation. It's not in any of their policies. It's great. When you're taking part in something, you're never asked if you're anything other than male or female. It's just great. So and I've said that, and people don't believe me. They say, "Oh, the NHS," but there are parts of the NHS where it doesn't happen, where we seem to have miraculously escaped from it, you know. And I go in hospitals in Bristol. I go in several hospitals in Bristol, including ordinary hospitals, and I don't see this rainbow nonsense. I don't see it. I don't see posters. I don't see stickers. I don't see lanyard wearing. In fact, most of the NHS staff nowadays seem to have gone back to just the blue NHS lanyards. So it's definitely the Darlington nurses. They've been brilliant. They've had loads of publicity. I mean, if you see, even if you never buy a newspaper, but you go into a shop where there are newspapers, and on the front page is Darlington nurses, and you know, the atmosphere is so much better than it was 3 or 4 years ago, and that encourages people to speak. That encourages people to come out of the woodwork and speak. You know, so I think it's great. It's great. I mean, don't forget, there's not very many of these people. They make a lot of noise, but they're a tiny minority, the activists. And what they do is they bus people around the country. They come to places like Bristol and Brighton and say, "Oh, there's going to be the fascists are meeting in such and such a town," and they take coach loads of them up there. They don't come from that town. So even in London, we were finding that they couldn't find maybe 50, 60 of them. They couldn't find even 100 of them to come and protest us, and that's in a major city, because they were having to go all over the country to find people willing to come. If it was rain, if the forecast was rain, they didn't come. You know, these people are not as it's not as bad as what you see on it. And people have said to me, "Oh, how can you possibly be there with all that going on?" And they're throwing smoke bombs. Well, if you're actually there and you're speaking, you hardly notice what is going on behind the police lines. You honestly don't notice it. But we haven't. The one we had in Bristol, it was so well policed that we hardly noticed they were there. To be honest, it was so well policed, and so that's the aim: is to make it safe for women to speak. You know, we should be able to go down to the nearest park, and if people want to get up and speak about something to a small audience, like, we ought to be able to do it without any problems at all. And that's one of the things I'm doing in Bristol, is finding good venues and encouraging women to find good venues. And then when we've got them, keep them friendly. I would say all you've got to do is Google your own district to find out what the suffragettes did in your own district. You will find many names of suffragettes who were, I don't know, in education or involved in the justice system, or maybe they were, trade unions. The suffragettes were very left wing. A lot of them were very left wing. So you'll find them that they were involved in local trade union activity. Just look up what happened in your own city. You will find there were probably blue plaques on the walls where they lived. In Bristol and Bath, there's literally dozens and dozens of well-known suffragettes. And by going out and having suffragette commemorations in public, we're doing one next Saturday actually, we can get a group of women together in public. And if anybody walks by and says, "Oh, what's this all about?" we hand them a leaflet about the suffragette who we're commemorating. We just let women speak details where people can look up the website. Very simple, and we've found that it's very easy. And now, obviously, a lot of women don't want to come out and do anything in public because they're still frightened for their jobs and things. That's absolutely fine. We only ask people who want to come. Nobody's forced to. And we don't even post photographs. We might take a photograph from not showing people's faces. But we can't, if you're out in public, you can't stop the public themselves taking photographs. So you don't know what's going to happen. So that's why we thought, hanging a lot of things around the suffragettes. We've got something like 6 or 7 suffragette events coming up in 2026. We do a suffragette graves walk every year in a big cemetery in Bristol where they're buried. We've got a banner. We're walking around quite openly, talking about it. And if members of the public are interested, they can stop and listen to what we're talking about. We find it a very good way of, and when nobody else is doing it, nobody else is doing suffragette commemorations. So why not do it? And the public immediately understand why you're doing it. They immediately understand. Oh yeah, that woman who lived in that house. Yeah, they immediately understand it. So um, it's a very good way of promoting women's rights. Because without them, where would we be? Without them, women might not even have got into universities. So yeah, the public understand it. So that's one of what we're doing, and we have a suffragette picnic once a year. Suffragette prisoners commemoration because they were in the local jail. They were in the local jail, so we have a walk around the jail, and anybody can come on these things. We invite family and friends, dogs, you know, and the public understand what we're doing. So, and then you can hand your own leaflets out. You let women speak leaflets and say, "Oh, by the way, we're organising this." The idea is to find new women who want to become involved. But you can't just put a poster out in the window. I think I've talked to you privately before this about how difficult it is as a political campaign because we can't just put a poster up in a shop window. The shop would get attacked by some idiot, some local idiot who didn't approve of it, which is unlike any other kind of political campaigning in Britain. I've not seen anything as hostile. I've not seen anything as vicious as this kind of cancel culture because they don't go after you, they go after whoever supports you. So that if you couldn't put a poster up in the window of the post office would get either overtly attacked by having their window smashed, or their management would and their staff would be targeted. And the same goes for things like having a talk in a library. You'd be lucky if you even managed to book the space. We've seen it happen time and time again, haven't we? So when we have our annual conference in Bristol, we've now had 2 of them. We've carefully found a venue, a brilliant venue, who are only too happy to have us, and we'll be going back again this year. And what you have to do, you have to find venues that are, and I'm not even going to say supportive venues, but venues that are neutral, that aren't opposed to a women's rights group coming in. And you're not going marching through the door saying, "Hey, look at us," to upset all their other customers. You're just booking a room so that you can do what you want in it. We organise offline. We use email, and some women like to use WhatsApp. So we organise offline, and we have strict criteria. So we will say, this event is okay. You could wear suffragette colours. You can bring friends and family. Or this event, no loud colours, please. Discreet badges, no stickering in the toilets because this is a friendly venue. So we actually give criteria for each different thing we organise. And I think that's important. And because we've been doing that now for the best part of 2 years, people have got used to it, got used to the way we organise it. And that applies to women from other groups who come and join in with us as well. But I've been involved in organising in local politics for 40 years of my adult life. So to me, this is just another thing that I've done. And I'm applying things that I know from that we did years ago that worked, and I'm applying those things to this. So to me, it's not really different. Still, we're very happy to advise other women if they want to set up groups or if they want to run events. We can quite happily come and have Zoom meetings with them or come and help them do it. We're more than happy to. Because we don't think in Bristol, because it's such a centre for this lunacy, we don't think we're going to get women who want to stand for elections as such, because it's too dangerous for women. Too dangerous. I would never send women out delivering leaflets, for example. And I mean, it was bad enough in political parties for for people delivering leaflets getting abused and stuff thrown at them and stuff like that. And that was just in ordinary, regular political parties. Never mind this. So I just wouldn't. I wouldn't do that anyway. So normal political activity in this is very difficult in the Bristol area, but social activity. That's why we've gone down the route of doing it as social events instead, you see. And then if women in neighbouring like areas like, I don't know, South Wales, Gloucestershire, Somerset did want to stand for election, we can go and support them. So we look at it that way, that we are creating a kind of a centre for social activity, but we can go and help the politics somewhere else. Who would want to stand for election in Bristol anyway? I've done it myself years ago, and I can assure you, it's the worst place in the world. You wouldn't want to do it, you know. Oh God, local politics. You know, what kind of person do you have to be? You know, and I think as well, women are not. Most women do not have this crabs in a bucket mentality that men have. Men are quite happy of trampling other people to get to the top. You know, it's a male thing. Most women do not have that. And if you do have that, then we can all see the exceptions, can't we? You know, the Nicola Sturgeons of this world, you know, the Angela Merkels of this world. We can all see how they've trampled Margaret Thatcher's of this world, how they've trampled other people to get to the top, which is a male attribute. Most women do not think like that and don't want to do that. So politics is a very, very difficult area for women. Women of all political parties get dogs abuse. They get death threats, they get rape threats, and that's of all political parties. But the women's rights thing added on top has made it much worse. So whatever abuse women had before in politics, you add this onto the top, makes it 100 times worse. Definitely it's more in mainstream, which means the public are more willing to talk about it. And even if all they say is, oh, what a load of nonsense, why are we talking? At least they know it's going on and what's happened, and that we shouldn't be, nothing should be done to children, and they know what the realities of it, you know. The broadcasters and things, that at least they're starting to use sensible language after all these court cases. And like I said, the atmosphere is changing in the sense that America is trying to put the lid on this. I mean, they've still got problems. They've still got states over there that are all for this, you know. But at least they're trying. The indoctrination in the schools, we've still got that going on. There's a lot that's still going on, but I believe that we have I believe that the momentum is on our side now. You know, reality is sort of coming back. I don't think you couldn't really pull this one off again, could you? If you imagine 20 years' time, somebody else, some new movement comes along and says, oh, men can pretend to be women, men can have babies. It's like, no, sorry, that ship has sailed. You've already tried that one. You know what I mean? They can't pull this one off again. We've been through the worst of this, and we're surviving. And it's like, you can't see the same thing being tried again. In the same way that they don't force feed women in prison who are in there for an ideal anymore. That is finished. They can't do that anymore. They tried it once, and this has been tried once, you know. And there will be other things that we've also got to fight against for the sake of humanity and for the sake of women's rights. But this delusion about actual biological sex, you know, you can't try that. You can't try that again, can you? It's like been tried and that's it. And everybody knows it's nonsense.
You've been listening to Unsilenced Project.